Today, we're going to be breaking down some things that you need to know as a wide receiver. So this first clip here is going to be this comeback route from Amon-Ra St. Brown in the red zone. And what I want to get across to you guys is that selling vertical is not always about running with speed. There are other elements of your routes that can help you sell vertical, like this peek back move that Amon-Ra does right here because we are in the red zone. Guys, you have to have situational awareness as a wide receiver. So obviously, let's think about this, right? They're on the 5-yard line. This wide receiver is playing man coverage. He's inside shade, right? So on every single route that we run, our goal is to make this DB think that we are going vertical, right? We are running a fade route. Everything's a fade until it's not a fade, and that obviously still applies in the red zone, but we do it a different way as a wide receiver. If we're in the middle of the field, like let's say we're on like the opposite 40-yard line, how St. Brown would run this comeback is he would get off the ball, he would push vertical, he'd run with good speed, he'd run with long strides, and he would run with a good pad level, which essentially means like he's just slightly leaning forward to make that DB think we're trying to take the top off the defense and go vertical. But in the red zone, that ain't going to work. So that can't be the only way that we run this route. We have to have other elements to it. So he comes at him, and we want to make this look exactly like a goal line fade. Ball's going right to the back pylon, and we are racing this DB there. That QB might throw a jump ball, right? So how do we do that? We come off the ball, we close the space, then we give a little move inside, and then we peek back with my eyes to the inside. And what that little peek back does right there is that gets that DB over anxious. He wants to play the fade. He doesn't want to get that head tap type catch. He wants to play the ball, so we get him to overcommit, and then we put the brakes on, and all we need, especially in the red zone, you guys, is 1 to 2 steps. And if we could get that 1 to 2 steps, especially if we have a quarterback who could put the ball on a good spot, that's an easy touchdown for us to make a play. So, guys, understand situational awareness as a wide receiver. You have to know that. Not everything is a deep vertical run as hard as you can fade. Sometimes we can use my eyes, my body language to manipulate a DB, especially when we're in the red zone. Now, this next example here is going to be from Brandon Aiyuk, and this is something that I think every wide receiver, I don't care how old you are, you could be 9 years old all the way up till 18 years old, needs to understand. But before we break this down, fellas, if you are a wide receiver and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches this offseason, we are going to be traveling out to 15 different locations in 2025 for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camp. So guys, check out that very first link in the description below if you would like to sign up. We'll be coming out to San Francisco, California, Orlando, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona. Those 3 camps, you guys, are completely or almost completely sold out. Our San Francisco camp has like 1 spot remaining. Then we have about 5 spots in Orlando and 10 spots in Phoenix left. So guys, if you're local to those 3 cities, make sure you take advantage of that this week. Our spots will be completely gone. Then we'll be coming out to Charlotte, Austin, Las Vegas, Seattle, Chicago, Newark, Birmingham, Houston, Boston, Columbus, Boise, and Los Angeles. So guys, if you're local to any one of these cities or would like to travel out, we'd absolutely love to have you there. So check out that very first link in the description below. Again, you guys, let's get back to this video. So now we're going to be talking about this clip from Brandon Aiyuk, how wide receivers can get more separation on routes where they have to drop their hips. This is something everybody needs to know, and something I would say to you guys, an analogy that I like to use with my receivers that you should know is you want to play musical chairs. So I think a lot of old school wide receiver advice was like the terminology of, hey, you're getting into a break and you want to sink your hips. You're getting into a break, you want to beat the drum, chop your feet and move your hands as fast as you can, and that's going to help you get in and out of the break, right? But I don't like those words. The beat the drum thing I absolutely hate, but I hate it when people say you want to sink your hips, because in my opinion, sinking is like a slower connotation, right? Like a boat, like think of it like a ship or something like that. The ship is sinking. That it's not going straight to the bottom. It's slowly sinking, right? I like thinking drop. I like thinking you're playing musical chairs, and when the music stops, what do? You sit down as quickly as you can. Now, the reason why we want to do this is to develop a concept called violent hips. When you could drop your hips violently, one thing that's going to do for you is help you decelerate quicker. And that's going to give the DB less time to be able to react on our routes. So we want to be violent, but also us being violent. If I have to run out of the break, like let's say, for example, I'm running a curl, a comeback, maybe I'm running a dig, me being violent creates energy, and energy allows me to explode and accelerate out of the break. So when you guys drop into a route like a stop route, curl, comeback, dig, let's be violent with my hips. Act like you're playing musical chairs. Now, something that a lot of receivers will do when I say that is they'll drop aggressively, but they will break this 90-degree angle right here that I have panic drawn. So guys, if your butt drops like below your knees, what's going to happen is your feet are going to get stuck. You're almost going to be dragging your feet and you're going to waste a bunch of time at the break. We want stability at the break point. So we want to be violent, but when I drop violently, the position I want to get to is a 90-degree position. If we could drop to there and do that consistently, that will help us stop, but it will also help us be high enough to where I could pick my feet up and actually run out of the break. So fellas, play musical chairs, and when we drop to that chair, it is at 90 degrees. Not only do we want to drop quickly to give a DB less time to react, but it gives us explosion to run out of the break. Now, we're going to be showing this clip here from Davante Adams. He was on the Packers, and this is a great example of how wide receivers can win like a 50-50 jump ball type situation. So he's just running like kind of his patented little skip release into a fade, but when that ball is thrown, that's what I ultimately want to pay attention to, right? So if you get a jump ball, fellas, number one thing, like I'm a big advocate of like when a ball keeps you in stride, right? Like, let's say we're running a deep fade ball, and that ball, a quarterback throws us the ball, keeps us in stride, we don't slow down. I want late hands, right? If that ball's thrown over my shoulder and drops in the bucket, I don't want to go up and get it at its highest point. But if that ball slows us down at all, I mean, even a little bit, we want to go up and get it at its highest point. And that's that like jump ball 50-50 ball. And if you're in the red zone and the quarterback is throwing an intentional jump ball, let's go get the ball at its highest possible point. Now, when we go up for that highest point catch, we obviously want to go up strong. We want to have strong hands. We want to look the ball in because obviously this DB makes his money in two specific spots on this. Either he times the jump with us and plays the ball as we go up, or what he does is he will try to play this thing on the way down. So that's where wide receivers can make their money. It's on the way down. We go up and get it. We have strong hands. But guys, the most important thing is that you are ripping this thing violently to the tuck. There's that word again. Violently to the tuck, and you want to use your body as a shield between the defender and the ball. So I've seen a lot of wide receivers do this before they go up for a high point catch, and they'll take this ball and like pull it behind their head. That's a way to do it. That's not my favorite way to do it because I feel like maybe a DB could still get a hand in there. At least that's how I feel. But it's unlikely, but I prefer what Davante Adams does right here. He goes up, secures the catch, and he turns his body. Put your body between the defender and the ball, and you will be more successful with those jump ball catches. Because remember, that DB plays that thing on the way down. If he times it on the way up, that's why we got to go up strong, but generally they're going to play it on the way down, so make sure we rip that thing away. Now, next thing I want to discuss that I feel every receiver needs to know is that when you're facing press coverage, you guys, it is more than just a step with your feet. You got to think of your releases like your entire body is attached to your foot because that is what ultimately sells your releases. From a DB perspective, like I'm not a DB guy. I don't coach DBs. I'm not a DB technical guy, but like I know that DB coaches teach their DBs. What are you supposed to watch on a wide receiver? We're supposed to watch their hips. If you're looking at the feet, you're going to be pretty easily faked out. If you're looking at the head and shoulders of a receiver, you're going to be pretty easily faked out. They say to look at the hips because the hips don't lie, right? The hips are going to tell you where the receiver is going to go. But from a receiver perspective, I think that could help us. I think if we could find a way to be able to sell my releases with my hips, attach them to my foot, I'm going to make my releases way more believable. I could step further because if my body goes with my foot, I'm going to have like more balance. My feet are going to be inside my frame. So this is a great example of a wide receiver doing something called a wide step release. A wide step release is where you take your back foot and you step like wide to the outside. Some people call this a jab step. I call it a wide step to get this DB to move to the outside so we could take the inside release. I love this when a DB is either outside leverage and we're trying to attack his leverage and make him think we're going outside to move him, or when he's head up like this and we do this to get him to jump outside so I could take the inside release, right? So let's watch what he does here. So that's a textbook wide step release. Like gets the DB to bite. It's very fast. It makes this DB think we're doing some type of speed release to the outside. Now what this receiver does to help him bring his hips with his foot is he uses something called a kick step. Now a lot of wide receiver coaches will say this is a false step. I don't believe this to be true. When you look at every single NFL wide receiver with their releases, they do some type of version of this to create speed, but also it helps their body go with their releases. So you see how he kicks behind his front foot? That's loading up his hips. So when you go to make this jab step, you guys, what I tell my receivers is you want to think that your head, your hip, and your foot, you were trying to stack them on top of each other. Obviously, you're never going to get to that perfectly like stacked position like I'm drawing on the screen here, but you see how far his hip has traveled. Like, look at where he starts and look at where that circle is that I drew. That's how far his hip traveled. And that's what's going to get that DB to bite. So fellas, when you guys take your steps off the ball, think that your hip is going with the foot. If your hip goes with the foot and you could stay in like kind of keep your toes forward, keep your shin angle almost on a 45, you'll be able to drive out just fine. You won't get stuck. And when your hip goes with your foot is not going to be way too wide outside your frame. To get a DB to jump, you have to step outside of his frame, aka outside of his shoulder frame. And the only way I could do that, and the only way I could step far enough to make it believable, is if the hip goes with the foot. So this is what you should be emphasizing, guys, on all of your releases. You could do this back to the inside. You'd give a 1-2. You give a single jab to the inside, but just make sure that you stay in that stacked or try to get to that stacked position.